side of the hill where there's a steep slope and a tree leaning sideways. They'll make an awful mess of the place. Oh well, said Beth. I suppose they know what they're doing. Somebody called them in, I suppose. They've got a couple of police there, too, seeing that people don't come near. I see, said Beth. Possibly she did. Not that anyone had told her, but then Beth never needed telling. A trainee Oliver smoothed out a telegram. She had just taken as delivered at her door. She was so used to getting telegrams through the telephone, making frenzied hunts for a pencil to take them down, insisting firmly she wanted a confirmatory copy sent to her. She called to herself, a real telegram again. Please bring Mrs. Butler and Miranda to your flat at once. No time to lose. Important. See doctor for operation. She went into the kitchen where Judith Butler was making quincy jelly. Judy, said Mrs. Oliver, go and pack a few things. I'm going back to London, and you're coming with me, and Miranda too. It's very nice of you, Adrini, but I've got a lot of things going here. Anyways, you needn't rush away today, need you? Yes, I need to. I've been told to, said Mrs. Oliver. Who's told you? Your housekeeper? No, said Mrs. Oliver, somebody else. One of the few people I obey. Come on, hurry up. I don't want to leave. I can't. You've got to come, said Mrs. Oliver. The car is ready. I brought it round to the front door. We can go at once. I don't think I want to take Miranda. I could leave her here with someone, with the Reynolds or Rowena. Miranda's coming too, Mrs. Oliver interrupted defiantly. Don't make difficulties, Judy. This is serious. I don't see how you even can consider leaving her with the Reynolds. 2 of the Reynolds children have been killed, haven't they? Yes, that's true enough. You think there's something wrong with that house? I mean, there's someone there who... Oh, what do I mean? We're talking too much, said Mrs. Oliver. If anyone's going to be killed, it seems to me it's most likely the one with Anne Reynolds. What's the matter with the family? Why should they all get killed one after another? Oh, Adrini, it's frightening. Yes, said Mrs. Oliver. But there are times when it's right to be frightened. I've had a telegram, and I'm acting upon it. Oh, I didn't hear the telephone. It didn't come through the telephone. It came to the door. She hesitated a moment, then held it out to her friend. What does this mean? Tonsils, probably, said Mrs. Oliver. Miranda had a bad throat last week, hadn't she? Well, what more likely than that should be taking to consult a throat specialist in London? Are you mad at Trini? Probably, said Mrs. Oliver, raving mad. Come on, Miranda. We'll be enjoying London. You needn't worry. She's not going to have any operation. That's what's called cover in spy stories. I'm frightened, said Judith. Adrini looked at her friend. She was trembling slightly. Come on, said Mrs. Oliver. I promised Hercule Pior I'd bring you when he gave me the word. What's going on in this place, said Judith. I can't think why I ever came here. I sometimes wondered why you did, said Mrs. Oliver. mother. We'll go and see a theater there. Mrs. Oliver thinks perhaps we can get tickets for the ballet. Would you like to go to the ballet? I'd love it, said Miranda. Her eyes lit up. I must go and say goodbye to my friends first. We're going practically at once. Oh, I shouldn't be as long as that, but I must explain. There are things I promised to do. She ran down the garden and disappeared through the gate. Who are Miranda's friends? Asked Mrs. Oliver with curiosity. I never really know, said Judith. She never tells one things, you know. Judith came downstairs again with a couple of suitcases, just as Miranda ran in through the side door, somewhat out of breath. Aren't we going to have lunch first? She demanded. We'll stop for lunch on the way, said Mrs. Oliver. We'll stop at the Black Haversham. That would be about right. It's about 3/4 of an hour from here, and they give you quite a good meal. Come on, Miranda, we're going to start now. I shan't have time to tell Kathy. I can't go to the pictures with her tomorrow. Oh, perhaps I could ring her up. Hurry, said her mother. I left a message, she said breathlessly. That's all right now. I think you're mad, said Adrini. I think you're mad, Adrini, said Judith, as they got into the car. Quite mad. What is all this about? I shall know in due course, I suppose, said Mrs. Oliver. I don't know if I'm mad, or if he is. You, Hercule Pior, said Mrs. Oliver. In London, Hercule was sitting in a room with 4 other men. One was Inspector Timothy Raglan, looking respectful and poker-faced. The second was Superintendent Spence. The third was Alfred Richmond, Chief Constable of the county, and the fourth was a man with a sharp legal face from the public prosecutor's office. They looked at Hercule with varying expressions. You seem quite sure, Monsieur Pior. I am sure, said Hercule Pior. When a thing arranges itself so, one realizes it must be so. The motive seems somewhat complex, if I may say so. No, said Pior, not complex really, but so simple, they're difficult to see clearly. The legal gentleman looked skeptical. We shall have one piece of definite evidence very soon tomorrow, said Inspector Reagan. Of course, if there has been a mistake on that point. Ding dong dell, no pussy in the well, said Hercule Pior. That is what you mean. Well, you must agree. It's only surmise on your part. The evidence pointed to it all along. When a girl disappears, there are not many reasons. The first is that she has gone away with a man. The second is that she is dead. Anything else is far-fetched and practically never happens. There are no special points that you can bring to our attention, Monsieur Pior. Yes, I have been in touch with a well-known firm of estate agents, friends of mine, who specialize in real estate in the West Indies, the Aegean, the Adriatic, and Mediterranean, and other places. They specialize in sunshine, and their clients are usually wealthy. Here is a recent purchase that might interest you. He handed over a folded paper. You think this ties up? I'm sure it does. I thought the sale of islands was prohibited by a particular government. Money can usually find a way. It's possible that within 24 hours I shall have for you something that will more or less cinch matters. What is that? An An eyewitness? You mean an eyewitness to a crime? The legal man looked at Pure with mounting disbelief. Where is this witness now? On the way to London. I hope and trust. You sound disturbed. I will take my leave. I have told you all that I know and all I fear and envisage as possible. I shall remain in touch. He shook hands all around with foreign precision and went out. The man's a bit of a mountebank, said the legal man. You don't think he's a bit touched, do you? Touched in the head himself. I mean, anyway, he's a pretty good age. I don't know if one can rely on the faculties of a man of that age. I think you can rely upon him, said the chief constable. At least, that is my impression. Spence, I've known you a good many years. You're a friend of his. Do you think he's become a little senile? No, I don't, said Superintendent Spence. What's your opinion, Reagan? I've only met him recently, sir. At first I thought his way of talking, his ideas, might be fantastic, but on the whole, I'm converted. I think he's going to be proved right. Mrs. Oliver had ensconced herself at a table in the window of the restaurant. It was still fairly early, so the dining room was not very full. Presently, Judith returned from powdering her nose and sat opposite and examined the menu. What does Miranda like? Asked Mrs. Oliver. We might as well order for her as well. I suppose she'll be back in a minute. She likes roast chicken. Well, that's easy then. What about you? I'll have the same. 3 roast chickens, Mrs. Oliver ordered. She leaned back, studying her friend. Why are you staring at me in that way? I was thinking, said Mrs. Oliver. Thinking what? Thinking really how very little I know about you. Well, that's the same with everybody, isn't it? You mean one never really knows all about anyone? I shouldn't think so. Perhaps you're right, said Mrs. Oliver. Both women were silent for some time. They're rather slow serving things here. It's coming now, I think, said Mrs. Oliver. A waitress arrived with a tray full of dishes. Miranda's a long time. Does she know where the dining room is? Yes, of course she does. We looked in on the way. Judith got up impatiently. I'll have to go and fetch her. I wonder if perhaps she gets car sick. She used to when she was younger. She returned some 4 or 5 minutes later. She's not in the lady, she said. There's a door outside into the garden. Perhaps she went that way to look at a bird or something. She's like that. No time to look at birds today, said Mrs. Oliver. Go and call her or something. We want to get on. Esbeth pricked some sausages with a fork, laid them on a baking dish, put it in the Frigidaire, and started to peel potatoes. The telephone rang. Mrs. McKay, Sergeant Goodwin here. Is your brother there? No, he's in London today. I've rung him there. He's left. When he gets back, tell him we've had a positive result. You mean you found a body in the well? Not much use clamming up about it. The world's got around already. Who is it, the au pair girl? Seems like it. Poor girl, said Esbeth. Did she throw herself in, or... It wasn't suicide. She was knifed. It was murder, all right. After her mother left the ladies' room, Miranda waited for a minute or two, then opened the door, cautiously peered out, opened the side door to the garden, which was close at hand, and ran down the garden path that led round the She went out a small door that enabled pedestrians to get into a lane outside. A little farther down the lane was a car parked. A man with gray eyebrows and a gray beard was sitting in it reading a newspaper. Miranda opened the door and climbed in beside the driving seat. She laughed. "You do look funny." "Have a hearty laugh. There's nothing to stop you." The car started, went down the lane, turned right, turned left, and came to a second road. "We're all right for time," said the gray-bearded man. "At the right moment, you'll see the double axe, as it ought to be seen." A car dashed past them so closely that they were almost forced into the hedge. "Young idiots," said the gray-bearded man. One of the young men had long hair reaching over his shoulders. The other one affected a more Spanish appearance with sideburns. "You don't think Mummy will worry about me?" asked Miranda. "She won't have time to worry about you. By the time she worries about you, you'll have got where you want to be." In London, Hercule picked up the telephone. Mrs. Oliver's voice came over. "We've lost Miranda." "What do you mean, lost her?" "We had lunch at the restaurant. She went to the loo. She didn't come back. Somebody said they saw her driving away with an elderly man." "Someone should have stayed with her. Neither of you ought to have let her out of your sight. I told you there was danger." "Is Mrs. Butler worried?" "Of course she's worried. What do you think? She's frantic. She insists on ringing the police." "Yes, that would be the natural thing to do. I will ring them also." "But why should Miranda be in danger? Don't you know? You ought to know by now," he added. "The body's been found." "I've just heard." "What body?" "A body in a well." "It's beautiful," said Miranda, looking around her. Kilterbury Ring was a local beauty spot, though its remains were not particularly famous. "Why did they have all these stones here?" "For ritual." "Ritual sacrifice. You understand sacrifice, don't you, Miranda?" "I think so. It has to be. You see, it's important." "You mean it's not a sort of punishment, it's something else?" "Yes, something else. You die so others should live. You die so beauty should live. That's the important thing." "I thought perhaps—" "Yes, Miranda. I thought perhaps you ought to die because of what you've done has killed someone else." "What put that into your head?" "I was thinking of Joyce. If I hadn't told her about something, she wouldn't have died, would she?" "Perhaps not." "I felt worried since Joyce died. I needn't have told her. I told her because I wanted to have something worthwhile telling her. She's been to India, and she kept talking about it." "Suddenly I wanted someone else to know because, you see, I hadn't really thought about it before." She nodded. Was that a sacrifice too?" "In a way." Miranda remained contemplative. Then she said, "Isn't it time yet?" "The sun is not quite right yet. Another 5 minutes, perhaps, and then we shall fall directly on the stone." Again they sat silent beside the car. "Now I think," said Miranda's companion, looking up at the sky. "I'll show you the double axe first. The double axe on the stone, carved there when they came from Mycenae, or from Crete hundreds of years ago. It's wonderful, Miranda, isn't it?" "Yes, it's very wonderful," said Miranda. "Show it me." They walked to the topmost stone. Beside it lay a fallen one, and a little farther down the slope, a slightly inclined one, leant as though bent with weariness of years. Are you happy, Miranda? Yes, I'm very happy. There's the sign here. Is that really the double axe? Yes, it's worn with time, but that's it. And now we will drink to the past and the future and to beauty. Oh, how lovely, said Miranda. A golden cup was put into her hand, and from a flask her companion poured a golden liquid into it. It tastes of fruit of peaches. Drink it, Miranda, and you will be happier still. Miranda took the cup. She sniffed it. Yes, it smells like peaches. Oh, look, there's the sun, really red gold, looking as though it was lying on the edge of the world. He turned her towards it. Hold the cup and drink. She turned immediately. One hand still on the methylitic stone, as it surmised sign. Her companion now was standing behind her. From below the inclined stone down the hill, two figures slipped out, bent half double. Those on the summit had their backs to them, and did not even notice them. Quickly but stealthily, they ran up the hill. Drink to beauty, Miranda. Like hell she does, said a voice behind them. A rose velvet coat shot over her head. A knife was knocked from the hand that was slowly rising. Nicholas Ransom caught hold of Miranda, clasping her tightly and dragging her away from the other two who were struggling. You bloody little idiot, said Nicholas Ransom, coming up here with a murderer. You should have known what you were doing. I did in a way, said Miranda. I was going to be a sacrifice, I think. Because it was all my fault. It was because of me that Joyce was killed. Don't start talking nonsense about ritual killings. They found that other girl. You know, the au pair girl who's been missing. A couple years or something like that. They all thought she'd run away because she forged a will. She hadn't run away. Her body was found in the well. Oh, Miranda gave a sudden cry of anguish. Not the wishing well. I don't want her to be in the wishing well. Who put her in there? The same person who brought you here. Once again, four men sat looking at Pure. Reagan, Superintendent Spence, and the chief constable had the pleased, expectant look of a cat who is counting on a saucer of cream. Well, Monsieur Pure, said the chief constable, taking charge of the proceedings and leading the DPP men to hold a watching brief. We're all here. He introduced them to Chief Constable, Mrs. Butler, Miss Miranda Butler, Mr. Nicholas Ransom, and Mr. Desmond Holland. Pure got up and took Miranda's hand. Sit here by your mother, Miranda. Mr. Richmond here, who is what is called a chief constable, wants to ask you some questions. He wants you to answer them. It concerns something you saw over a year now. Nearer 2 years. You mentioned this to one person. Is that correct? I told Joyce. And what exactly did you tell Joyce? That I'd seen a murder. Did you tell anyone else? No, but I think Leopold guessed. He listens, you know, at doors, that sort of thing. He likes to know people's secrets. You have heard that Joyce, on the afternoon before the Halloween party, claimed she had seen a murder. Was that true? No, she was just repeating what I told her, but pretending it happened to her. Will you tell us now what you did see? I didn't know at first that it was a murder. I thought there had been an accident. I thought she'd fallen from above somewhere. Where was this? In the quarry garden, in the hollow where the fountain used to be. I was up in the branches of a tree. I'd been looking at a squirrel. And one has to keep very quiet or they rush away. Squirrels are quick. Tell us what you saw. A man and a woman lifted her up and were carrying her up the path. I thought they were taking her to a hospital or the quarry house. Then the woman stopped suddenly and said, "Someone is watching us," and stared at my tree. Somehow it made me frightened. I kept still. The man said nonsense, and they went on. I saw there was blood on a scarf, and there was a knife with blood on that, and I thought perhaps someone had tried to kill themselves. And I went on keeping still. Because you were frightened? Yes, but I don't know why. You didn't tell your mother? No, I thought perhaps I ought to have been there watching. So I forgot about it. I never thought about it again until she stopped suddenly. The chief opened his mouth and shut it. He looked at Pior and made a very slight gesture. Yes, Miranda, said Pior, until what? It was as though it was happening all over again. It was a green woodpecker this time. I was being still, watching it from behind some bushes, and those two were sitting there talking about an island, a Greek island. It's ours, we can go up to it whenever we like, but we better go slow and not rush things. And then the woodpecker flew away and I moved. You see, I wasn't a child anymore. I knew things and what they must mean. The blood, the knife, the dead body, all limp. When was this? Asked Chief Constable. How long ago? Miranda thought for a moment. Last March, just after Easter. Can you say definitely who these people were, Miranda? Of course I can. You saw their faces, of course. Who are they? Mrs. Drake and Michael. It was not a dramatic denunciation. Her voice was quiet with something in it like wonder, but it carried conviction. The chief constable said, "You did not tell anyone. Why not?" I thought it might have been a sacrifice. Who told you that? Michael told me that. He said sacrifices were necessary. Pior said gently, "You love Michael." "Oh yes," said Miranda. "I loved him very much." "Now I've got you here at last," said Mrs. Oliver. "I want to know all about everything." She looked at Pior with determination and asked severely, "Why haven't you come sooner?" "My excuses, madame. I have never been much occupied assisting the police with their inquiries." "It's criminals who do that. What on earth made you think Rowena Drake being mixed up in a murder? No one else would have dreamed it." "It was simple as soon as I got the vital clue." "What do you call the vital clue?" "Water." I wanted someone who was at the party, who was wet, and who shouldn't have been wet. Whoever killed Joyce would necessarily have got wet. You hold down a vigorous child with its head in a full bucket of water. There will be struggling and splashing, and you're bound to be wet. So something has got to happen to provide an innocent explanation of how you got wet. When everyone crowded into the dining room for the snapdragon, Mrs. Drake took Joyce with her to the library. If your hostess asks you to come with her, naturally you go. And certainly Joyce had no suspicion of Mrs. Drake. And so, said Pior, twirling his his mustaches, I too knew who the murderer of Joyce was. And all the time, Joyce had never seen any murder committed at all. Mrs. Drake did not know that, but she had always suspected someone had been there in Quarrywood when she and Michael had killed Olga, and might have seen it happen. When did you know it had been Miranda and not Joyce? As soon as common sense forced me to accept the universal verdict that Joyce was a liar. Oh, no. Rowena Drake, mused Mrs. Oliver. I still can't believe it. She had all the qualities necessary. I have always wondered, he added, exactly what sort of woman Lady Macbeth was. What would she be like if you met her in real life? Well, I think I have met her. And Michael Garfield. They seem such an unlikely pair. Interesting, Lady Macbeth and Narcissus, an unusual combination. Lady Macbeth, Mrs. Oliver muttered thoughtfully. She was a handsome woman, efficient and competent, a board administrator, an unexpectedly good actress. You should have heard her lamenting over the death of the little boy Leopold, and weeping large sobs into a dry handkerchief. Disgusting. You remember I asked you who, in your opinion, were not nice people. Was Michael Garfield in love with her? I doubt if Michael Garfield has ever loved anyone but himself. He wasted money, a lot of money. Perhaps he believed at first he could influence Mrs. Llewellyn Smith to dote upon him to the extent of making a will in his favor. But Mrs. Llewellyn Smith was not that kind of woman. What about the forgery? I still don't understand it. What was the point of it all? It was confusing at first. Too much forgery, one might say. But if one considered it, the purpose of it was clear. You had to only consider what actually happened. Mrs. Llewellyn Smith's fortune all went to Rowena Drake. The codicil produced was so obviously forged that any lawyer would spot it. As Rowena Drake's husband had recently died, she would inherit everything. But what about the codicil that the cleaning woman witnessed? My surmise is that Mrs. Llewellyn Smith discovered Michael Garfield and Rowena Drake were having an affair, probably before her husband died. In her anger, Mrs. Llewellyn Smith made a codicil to her will, leaving everything to her au pair girl. Probably the girl told Michael about this. She was hoping to marry him. I thought it was young Ferrier. That was a plausible tale, told me by Michael. There was no confirmation of it. Then if he knew there was a real codicil, why didn't he marry Olga and get hold of the money that way? Because he doubted whether she really would get the money. There is such a thing as undue influence. And Rowena Drake, she was infatuated. Her husband had for many years been a crippled invalid. She was middle-aged, but she was a passionate woman, and into her orbit came a young man of unusual beauty. Women fell for him easily, but he wanted not the beauty of women, but the exercise of his own creative urge to make beauty. For that he wanted money, a lot of money. As for love, he only loved himself. He was Narcissus. There is an old French song I heard many years ago. I simply can't believe that anyone would do murder just to make a garden on a Greek island, said Mrs. Oliver unbelievingly. not for a woman, but for himself. It still seems to me quite mad. Yes, that happens. I doubt if he even thought of his motive as sordid. He thought of it only as necessary for the creation of more beauty. He'd gone mad on creation, the beauty of the quarry wood, the beauty of other gardens he laid out and made. And there was Rowena Drake, infatuated with him. What did she mean to him but the source of money with which he could create beauty? Yes, he had become mad, probably. He really wanted his island so much. Even with Rowena Drake tied around his neck as well, bossing him around the whole time. Accidents can happen. I think one might possibly have happened to Mrs. Drake in due course. One more murder. Yes. It started simply. Olga had to be removed because she knew about the codicil, and she was also to be the scapegoat, branded as a foreigner. Mrs. Llewellyn Smith has hidden the original document, so I think that young Ferrier was given the money to produce a similar forged document. So obviously forged that it would arouse suspicion at once. That sealed his death warrant. Leslie Ferrier soon decided he had no arrangement or love affair with Olga. That was a suggestion made to me by Michael Garfield. But I think it was Michael who paid money to Leslie. You suspected her because of the water clue, said Mrs. Oliver. How did you come to suspect Michael Garfield? He fit, said Pure simply. And then the last time I spoke to Michael, I was sure. He said it to me, laughing. Get thee beyond me, Satan. Go and join your police friends. And I knew then quite certainly it was the other way around. I said to myself, I am leaving you behind me, Satan. A Satan so young and beautiful as Lucifer can appear to mortals. There was another woman in the room. Until now she had not spoken. But now she stirred in her chair. Lucifer, she said. Yes, I see now. He was always that. He was very beautiful, said Pure, and he loved beauty. The beauty that he made with his brain and his imagination and his hands. Oliver lunched. She was to have been found on Kilberry Ring, there by the sign of the double axe, with a golden goblet by her side, a ritual sacrifice. He must have been mad. Madame, your daughter is safe, but there is something I would like you to know very much. I think you deserve to know anything I can tell you, Monsieur Pure. She is your daughter. Was she also Michael Garfield's daughter? Judith was silent for a moment, then she said, Yes, but she doesn't know that. No, she has no idea. Meeting him here was a pure coincidence. I knew him when I was a young girl. I fell in love with him, and then I got afraid. Afraid? Yes, I don't know why. Not of anything he would do. Just afraid of his nature, his gentleness, but behind it a cold ruthlessness. I was afraid of his passion for beauty and for creation in his work. I didn't tell him I was going to have a child. I left him. I went away and the baby was born. I invented the story of a pilot husband who had a crash. I moved about rather restlessly. I came to Woodley Common more or less by chance. I had got contacts in Manchester where I could find secretarial work. And then one day, Michael Garfield came here to work in the quarry wood. I don't think I minded, nor did he. All of that was over long ago. But later, although I didn't realize how often Miranda went to the wood, I did worry. Yes, said Pure, there was a bond between them, a natural affinity. I saw the likeness between them, only Michael Garfield was evil. Your daughter has innocence and wisdom, and there is no evil in her. He went over to his desk and brought back an envelope. Out of it he drew a delicate pencil drawing. Your daughter, he said. Judith looked at it. It was signed Michael Garfield. He was drawing her by the streams and pure, in the gory wood. He drew it, he said, so that he should not forget. He was afraid of forgetting. It would have stopped him killing her, though. Then he pointed to a penciled word across the top left-hand corner. Can you read that? She spelled it out slowly. Epifia. Yes, pure Epifia. Agamemnon sacrificed his daughter so that he should get a wind to take his ships to Troy. Michael would have sacrificed his daughter so he would have a new garden. He knew what he was doing, said Judith. I wonder if he would have had regrets. Pior did not answer. A picture was forming in his mind of a young man of singular beauty, lying in a metholithic stone marked with a double axe, and still clasping in his dead fingers the golden goblet he seized and drained when retribution had come suddenly to save his victim and to deliver him to justice. It was so that Michael Garfield had died, a fitting death. Bureau thought, but alas, there would be no garden blossoming on an island in the Greek seas. Instead, there would be Miranda, alive and young and beautiful. He raised Judith's hand and kissed it. Goodbye, madame, and remember me. To your daughter. She ought always to remember you and what she owes you. Better not. Some memories are better buried. He went on to Mrs. Oliver. Good night, Sherry Madame, Lady Macbeth, and Narcissus. It has been remarkably interesting. I have to thank you for bringing it to my notice. That's right, said Mrs. Oliver in an exasperated voice. Blame it all on me, as usual. Well, guys, that is the end of the book. That was a crazy twist I did not see coming. That was really crazy. Did you guys see it coming? Did you kind of suspect it? I certainly didn't. So, wow, that was really good. I enjoyed it a lot. What do you guys think? Would you like to hear another story from Agatha Christie? Let me know in the comments. We might have to do another. I thought she was quite a good writer. Yeah, that was a pretty good one. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Next week we will be doing some short stories for the following, like probably a month or two every week. It won't be a continuation, like a long story like this one was. It will be like, I'm guessing probably like 15-minute stories. So every week there will be a new story, no continuations. And then we'll have to see what book we read next after that.